everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the CIP hearing for the Council Committee, Finance Committee of the Rochester City Council, and I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Evans,
Present.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Patterson,
Here.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Here.
President Scott.
Here.
And we are joined by the rest of our council colleagues, except for Harris and Gruber.
Gruber is here.
Gruber is
Gruber is here.
Thank you.
Okay, I see him. All right, perfect. So this is our annual CIP hearing. As the first part of our budget, what we are going to do is go through this section by section. But before we get started, I wanted to turn it over to Mayor Warren and Budget Director Wagner to make any comments that they may have.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans, and to the rest of council. As you are aware, the pandemic and associated response have created a serious fiscal crisis that has resulted in a tremendous amount of uncertainty, including impacts to two of the city's primary revenues, sales tax and state aid. In response to that uncertainty, the city has adopted a strategy of reducing expenses where possible. We have been putting away and saving cash and creating flexibility to be able to adapt to changing circumstances. The proposed CIP significantly limits the amount of general fund cash capital allocated in the first year by eliminating, reducing, or deferring some items and shifting others suitable for borrowing to debt. Doing this relieves stress on the operating budget in the first year and reduces the amount of cash to be expended. This strategy increases the amount of tax-supported debt in the first year of the program beyond the limit set by the city's debt policy. As a result, I'm asking council for an exception to the debt limit in the amount of $21,853,000. While I know that you all and I am concerned at the increased amount of borrowing sought, this would allow us to pay for the necessary projects over time and gives us the flexibility to evaluate our financial circumstances and make decisions on a project-by-project basis prior to actually borrowing the funds. Year 2, 3 through 5 of the program show the projects that the city proposes to undertake. However, the out years, of course, show something a little bit different. We are definitely trying to make sure that we are being great fiscal stewards of the city's finances during this time of uncertainty. We did not want to do long-term solutions for what we believe is a short-term problem. And so as you go through this CIP, you will see that we made the necessary adjustments that we believe will put the city in the best financial position when it comes down to our financial and our capital projects. I am now going to turn it over to our budget director, who will have some comments, and then we will gladly answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to say a quick thank you to the mayor, deputy mayor, and the investment priorities team. This is a very difficult task given the pandemic, and very late in the process, we had to go back and revisit everything. So, again, thanks to that team for all their hard work, and especially Matt Cahill, our capital analyst, for actually getting the book done and getting it out before the hearing. So with that, we'll entertain your questions.
Your budget feedback that you're asking for, because I know the budget comes out May 15th, but I know you're looking for citizen feedback. So you can just touch on that real quick before we get into questions.
So I can speak to that, and the mayor can chime in too. We have we've got a survey up now, and we'll be doing a telephone town hall early next week to solicit some citizen feedback. Obviously, we had to cancel the normal atrium session that we had because of the constraints of the pandemic.
The budget director is absolutely correct. We also, during that survey, we have a number of questions related to the coronavirus and what's happening there. And we are hopeful to be able to address some of the concerns that citizens may have on a teletown hall that we will be doing next week, May 5th. to get their input. And we, of course, have been delayed because of the issues and because the budget has been changing daily, given the situation that we're in and the uncertainty in revenues. There have been a lot of different changes coming from the state and the federal government, and we wanted to make sure that we have the most accurate information to provide to council and to our citizens that we have available.
Thank you, Mayor. And so given our online format and the fact that some folks may be switching between their screens, I'd like to try to work us through this document subsection by subsection. And I would also note that we have staff capturing unanswered questions on the council side. And from the budget side, Sarah Ruckberg will be capturing questions. And as you know, we have time because we won't be voting on this until budget time. So if you have questions that may come up later, you can always submit those through our normal process. So we're going to start the first section with transportation and infrastructure section. Councilmember Patterson, I know you had a question on the transmittal letter, and then you also can direct in your questions to T1 arterial improvements. So if you have questions on that, Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. So in the transmittal letter on page 2, you're talking about transportation infrastructure changes of 18 million. But the elements that you're showing there come out to roughly 9 million. Where's the other 9 million coming from? Where is that additional change at?
So the way the memo is structured, it's just calling out for you the sum, of city investment by category. And we're calling out specific highlights. The bullets below are not intended to sort of add up to that full amount.
Okay, so that then addresses my next question then over there on page 3, municipal facilities, the 16.5 million, you're short like 4 million, but so basically you're saying the big points are these, the other sub points are in there, and the total is what the total is reflected at the top.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So T1, our arterial improvements. Any questions, Councilmember Gruber?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that in the first, well, let me first say I'm probably going to repeat myself on this question quite a bit throughout this process, because I think one of the most challenging things I can imagine for this whole process was figuring out what to prioritize and what not to. Totally understand that some things had to be cut this year, but understanding the strategy for what was prioritized, I'd like to ask that generally, but then specifically on the first item, the Broadway from South Union to South Goodman. I see that the sentence from last year that was removed is specifically related to bicycle infrastructure and the complete streets policy. So I'm wondering, is that something that had to be sacrificed on that project, and how was that decision made?
Chris,
Commissioner Jones, overall, throughout the CIP, we went to and, of course, asked all of the department heads to take a deep look at what information they had available, and some projects were funded by other entities. So if we're receiving money by the federal government or the County of Monroe or the state of New York, those of course were priority projects that we have dollars on hand right now that can have these projects go first. Additionally, we considered the projects that our citizens have been in the queue and waiting for. And so we weighed that against the amount of money that we had available. So there are so every department head took a deep look into the CIP and what they were proposing, and the things that we thought that could be pushed off to year 2, 3, 4, and 5. We pushed it off. The things that we had dollars for from other entities that we could be in jeopardy of losing, because we do know that every level of government is in the same situation that we're in. We wanted to make sure that we encumbered those funds and move those projects forward as quickly as possible, given that situation. Now I will turn it over to Commissioner Jones. And one of the things that I should have said at the very beginning of this, because generally we are all in the same room and all of our staff are available. So we can turn it over to someone that may have some detailed information on a particular project. You will hear the commissioner answering the question first, and then it may turn over to another staff person if it's a more detailed question. Commissioner
you.
Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilperson, Committee Chair Gruber, all of our road construction projects as part of our Complete Streets strategy has some type of bicycle component associated with it, and pedestrian-friendly component associated with it. Maybe it's just, in what we did with the verbiage, leaving that out. But believe me, we are over 100 miles of bicycle lanes in the city, and continually, that's part of our process, part of our programs. So we'll look into it. We'll get back to you with a definitive on that. But I'm pretty sure that the elements of bicycle transportation is part of that reconstruction.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Jones. And I know you and your team are very committed to complete streets and bicycle infrastructure. That's partially why I was surprised the language was gone. So if it's just a matter of different language year to year, no problem. Just let me know afterwards. I would also like to propose that I think this is one of the places where the city has been incredibly forward thinking in the investments that we're making in terms of bicycle infrastructure. But as you know better than anyone, Commissioner, there's probably ways that we could still get the point across that we want and make bicycling safer for people without having to spend huge dollars with things like the different bollards and the, whatever you call those white things that look like plungers that we put over on Broad Street. So I hope that we're using this year and this pandemic to really try to squeeze every dime out of creative thinking like that, if possible.
There's Councilperson Gruber, there's many strategies that we have in our toolbox, and we are going to use every single one of them to get the most out of our construction dollars, our engineering dollars, to making sure that we meet the needs of our ever-changing community.
Thank you. Anything else on T1 arterial improvements? Okay, let's move to T2.
I do. Can you hear me?
Councilmember Lubian, you have questions on T1?
Yes.
Arterial improvements, okay, go ahead.
Yes. So wondering if we can get an update on the East Main Street project and if there's been a final design settled on.
Trying to unmute myself. It's
This format's kind of crazy, I know. Go ahead,
So,
Commissioner Jones.
Right now, Councilperson Lupian, we have a final design that I think everyone's going to be pleased with. The opportunity that we have is that how do we get this out to everyone? We're working with Justin Roy in communications on putting together a platform where we can basically show the design, get Q&A, and reveal what the final design is. And I'm pretty sure that everyone should be happy with this.
Wonderful. It's great to hear. Do you have an estimated time frame of when that might happen?
Well, we're ready to go today, but we have to work with communications to make sure that we have a platform that we get all the stakeholders an opportunity to be involved.
I know how challenging that is.
And that's part of the process. We have to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to speak to this. So we're there, we're ready, and I think everyone should be pleased with what we have.
Thank you. I have one other question.
Yeah.
Regarding the Union Street and the North Goodman Street, could I just get a justification as to why Union Street is ahead of North Goodman?
Say that again. What Union Street and North Goodman?
Yeah.
Okay, we can provide that to you.
Thank you.
But what we do, we have a way of rating our streets. There's a street rating process. We actually spend money. We have a company that comes in and gives us an actual rating. And some of these streets may be sponsored by federal dollars. Some of these streets may be sponsored by state dollars. Some of these streets may be sponsored by county dollars. The mayor alluded to that earlier. And some of these streets are done primarily with city dollars. Depending on where we're at from a financial standpoint, we have to look at the, how do we, if the federal government's going to give us 90 cents on the dollar what we spend, we get more bang from our buck from our city dollars by using that. So Goodman Street and Union Street, parts of Union Street is part of the state system, and there's funds associated with that. But I'll get back to you with a definitive on both of these streets.
And if you look at the T1 book, it will tell you the sources of funding. And so right now in 2021, we have $215,000 from the county and 85 from Water Cash Capital. And then in 21-22, we have 3.285 million and 835,000 in city debt. So that goes along with what Commissioner Jones was outlining. And so if you look down at the North Goodman, you can see that we don't have any dollars available from any other sources in 2021 or 21-22. It goes to what I was saying earlier, when we talk about what do we have dollars for from other sources, and making those a priority so that we can, our dollars is in addition to what we already have from another source, and not just city dollars driving the decision.
Okay, and so when it says Monroe County, that's an outside source?
That's the County of Monroe.
Right. So is there, and this is, this is my first time going through this, so I appreciate you guys bearing with me. So how does it, so I see that, for Union, 3 million is coming out of Monroe County in 2021. And for North Goodman, there's, 2.3 coming out in 24-25. Is it does the city kind of drive what years those come out of? Or is it based on something else?
So we are a part of the county's transportation system. And so we are a member of that team, and based on, it's the same thing with the state and some of the federal projects. And so we would submit information to them based on, as the commissioner was talking about, the ratings. Streets are rated. It depends on the dollars that are available and the condition that the street is in. And then we go and we provide that information to the county as a part of a group. The county has to, of course, fund towns and their own roads and other things like that. So we work collectively together to make sure that the roads that we're asking for dollars for out of that transportation pot that is shared with other municipalities, that they're in the condition that they need to be repaired. And so it's a little bit of both, where we're submitting documentation to them, and it's also what they have the money to be able to do. And all of it is based on the condition of the road and what we need to do in order to make it as safe as possible. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Commissioner Jones.
Mayor, you said it, perfect. Nothing else to add?
Thank you.
Okay, just a quick question on T1, but I don't need an answer to it now. I can get it later in writing. I see that there's a slight increase, like 1.1 million, just what's driving that. Any other questions on T2, T3, T4, 5, 6, or 7?
I have a T2 question, Councilmember Evans.
Yes, T2, Councilmember Gruber.
Just wondering, Brown's Race is a new program in here. I'm wondering if there's a reason for its kind of jump up the prioritization ladder, if there's safety issues over there that need to be considered.
Brown's Race is a unique building. It was, over 100 years old. There are certain things that were done back in the early 90s, and there's things that need to be, reaffirmed and reestablished. And there's going to be a plan coming out in the very near future on what was going to be happening at Browns Race. But basically, you have an area that's over 150 years old, and there's certain things shift, and there's certain things that need to be supported. Along with what we're doing with the Rock the Riverway and other things, it's a perfect time to make sure that that's in place.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, that is kind of part of my general concern. And the first question I was asking about prioritization. I mean, I know it's later on in the transportation section, but I think for the Pont de Rennes Bridge, we are postponing that for a year. And I'm sure that I don't doubt for a moment that you, of all people, Commissioner Jones, are taking the public safety into consideration first and foremost. But I think that's an important thing for us as council to hear and to be able to explain to constituents. I'm assuming there's a reason why Browns Race has jumped up to the front of the ladder and why Pont de Rennes got moved back, and that some of it has to do with the safety of our citizens. Can you just comment on that a little bit?
Pont de Rennes is really not being moved back. What we're doing with Pont de Rennes is we're doing the design first. We won't need the construction dollars until next year. So it's going to be a very intricate design. We're in the process of interviewing different consulting engineering firms, and we'll be making a selection in the very near future. And it's going to take probably about a good year to 14 months to design this because of the structural uniqueness of the structure there. So it made sense to push the actual construction back. Now, this Pont de Rennes is also a Rock the Riverway campaign program in which we're going to get state funding to support this. Browns Race is something where we have to continually put resources there to make sure that we keep the structural integrity of that area flowing. But Pont de Rennes, that was pushed back from a strategy standpoint because we're not going to be doing construction until probably next year at this time. We'll be coming out with construction documents, looking at next year's CIP to support that.
Thank you. And Councilmember Evans, I'll close my mouth after this. I just want to maybe ask it in a more explicit way, Commissioner and Mayor. You know, there's been a lot of cuts had to be made during the CIP. I just want to kind of hear the reassurance from you all that none of those cuts have been to the detriment of the safety of things like roads and bridges, and that where we had to prioritize those things to be funded this year, we were able to do so. Are there any places where you feel like we actually the deficit or the pandemic has made it so that we're really putting anything into jeopardy?
No, we're not, and I think that part of the reason why we're asking council to put such a significant exception to our debt limit is because we are going to borrow more, and that is going to allow us to keep with those essential projects that are needed and that we need to do. And so we're still going to be repairing our roads. We're still going to be repairing our bridges. We're still going to be making those necessary investments that we need to make. We're just not doing it with what we would typically do with a lot of cash capital. So we're shifting things around. When you look at Browns Race, it's $125,000 in 2021. And that's really to take care of some emergency things that need to be done with fixtures and other things. And then the next year, you have a $900,000 hit that will, go to replacing some ballards and some other existing pavers and other things. So what the commissioner is basically saying is that when we took a look at projects, because we don't have the ability here in Rochester to do what they call design build. So design build means that everything is done up front. So the same company that you would hire for engineering, they are also the same company that would actually build the project. In Rochester, the state of New York has not given us the authority to do design build. So we have to do things in phases. So projects that we can do phased in, you will see that we are going to be doing design, and then the construction of that is pushed out in prior in further years. And so that's the reason why you'll see that breakdown in many of these. And so when you look at specifically the Ponte Run Bridge, because we might have originally had all the money in the first year for design and construction, we decided to split it out. Design first, that's essential, and then next year into construction.
Thank you. Anything else on T1 through T7? Okay, if
Yes.
not, we'll move, who's that?
That's Councilmember Lupian.
Lupian. All right, T1 through T7.
You're gonna hear
Councilmember.
me a lot.
All right, go ahead.
So this is T2 with Gibbs Street. I see that's something that's being prioritized in 2021, at least, you know, maybe for some design work. But I also, so I'm just wondering what that reconstruction looks like. I've heard that maybe U of R is looking at turning that into a pedestrian street and requesting that. So I'm wondering if that would fit in with that change, or if this is for road improvements.
This is for road improvements, and when we look at Gibbs Street, once again, we look at the actual infrastructure of the street. We look at what's going on underneath the street in regards to the sewers, the electrical service, the gas service, you know, the water service, the street base, and we look at that to see what do we need to do to make sure that is true. Now, if there's some stakeholders that have some opportunities in which they want to look at the development, now's the time as we start looking at the program for them to come and speak and say, guess what, we have some ideas of what's going on. But that will be part of our process, our total process. When we look at the actual street, if they want to shut the street down, they have to come. We have to look at it from a traffic engineering standpoint and see if that's doable. We look at it from all aspects of it. And we also talk to all the other stakeholders beside the U of R. There's people that are on Weldon Street, there's people on Grove Place that are part of the process also. But the first thing that we look at when we do a street, we look at the condition of the street and the actual viability of that infrastructure.
Thank you. And I would also note that we are now also joined by Councilmember Harris. I'm going to move on to the public waterfront section.
Actually, sorry, Councilmember Evans, I have two more questions. One on T4.
On the T section?
Yeah, on T4 and T6.
Okay, go ahead.
So for T4, which is traffic calming and safety improvements, and then T6, the LED installation and pole replacement, if there's no funding allocated, does that mean that there will be no measures for traffic calming and safety improvements or LED light installation in 2021?
No.
We have,
Go ahead,
Mayor.
Commissioner. Go ahead.
We have old funds that's available that we'll be utilizing as we restructure our debt, as we restructure our programs. We look at resources that we have available on hand to take advantage of that. There's also grant opportunities and grants that are out there in regards to, this is for LED lights. And then the other part of the question, traffic calming. As you recall, back in January, we received a $2.4 million grant from New York State to assist us with all types of traffic calming. And that will be the source of funds that we'll utilize to make sure that that happens. Traffic calming, LED lights is part of our regular platform, and we are going to keep doing that because it makes for a better community, a better neighborhood, and it saves us money from the LED light street lighting system. We saved over $1 million in the last 2 years by just changing over from HID to LED.
Yeah, I think similar to what Councilmember Groomer mentioned, it's really good just to hear that and to kind of reaffirm our priorities. So thank you.
Anything else, Councilmember Lupian on the T's? Okay.
Councilmember Evans, can I just pop in and ask what Project Uplift was that got canceled with the enhanced street lighting for public safety?
Well, part of Project Uplift is a team approach where we come into different neighborhoods that have had some concerns, where we come in and we change out the street lights, we change out some of the we cut out some shrubs. We changed the vistas. We put in speed humps. We've really have been able to change different areas. One area was an example when the mayor, this was about 4 years ago, Mayor, we went over to the Scranton Street area, and we went and we came in, we changed out all the lights. We put in LED lights. We were able to ramp up the actual output. We put in speed humps, and we changed the actual flow of traffic in that neighborhood. So we've been able to do that. And I think what we're going to do is use old cash, or old debt, to actually do some of these things for uplift. That's another example of us using some old funds that are available for us to manage what we have going on right now.
Thank you. Project Uplift is also the name of a initiative going on right now with ESL United Way. So it was just a nomenclature thing. Thanks for clarifying.
But by Uplift, we've been doing this for, I think, almost 20 years now.
Right, Commissioner, I'd like to ask about that Project Uplift. Is that also, you talked about the infrastructure and the things that are done through DES, but is that also the program where they knock onto people's doors and give out a lot of information, smoke detectors, all of that kind of, so it's good to hear that you're saying you're gonna retool some other monies to be able to continue those, because that was also a community relations type program as well, correct?
Yes,
Absolutely.
so what we're doing with Project Uplift, I think that what the commissioner is clearly saying is that, and I want to be clear that sometimes when you see zero here, it doesn't mean that we are not making an investment at all. It may mean that we have dollars that are left over from another project, or a project that is not necessarily complete yet, that we're shifting around that can be used for that particular project. So there will be project uplifts done, and it is a all-encompassing approach that not just includes DES, but this is talking about the actual infrastructure. There's a part of project uplift that is also an MBD that is in partnership with our neighborhood service centers and many of our other not-for-profit organizations where they do door knocking. They provide different information. The Mayor's Office of Constituent Services as well have gone out. But this specifically was meant, dollars that was meant for putting in speed humps, changing LED, doing a really focused sort of investment on a particular street that we saw some challenges in our police department or with working with neighbors they had. And this allowed us to do that. We have other dollars that have been assigned that will allow us to do this next year, continue to do this in 2021. And that's why you see that we are encumbering dollars in 21, 22 for this project to put it back in the CIP.
Thank you. All right, there's nothing else on T. Let's move on to O, 01 through 06. Quick question, is the Duran Park Beach House, is the idea to have that up and running in 22, 23?
Well, we're doing the design now, and we'll do the design, and then once we complete that, the goal is to have possibly up and running by 2021, 22, 23.
Cool, great. Anything else? Any questions from folks on 01 through 06?
Just one quickly, Councilmember Evans.
Yep, Councilmember Gruber, and then I think I saw Councilmember Pio after that. Go ahead, Councilmember Gruber.
Great. I see that we've added to the West River Wall project. I think that is absolutely a place to prioritize. I think we've done a remarkable job getting to the point we're at right now. Just trying to understand, what is the long term? Is the plan, in fact, according to what I'm seeing on page 2-2, that we'll be done spending money on this after 2022, 23? Is that right?
That's phase 3 of the West River Wall, phase 3, that part of it. As you know, and I know the commissioner will talk about, part of this funding in phase 1 and 2 came from the federal government, came from the state government. Right now, we're in Rock the Riverway working, of course, with the Cornhill Neighbors Association and Cornhill Navigation on what we're currently in. And so this doesn't negate the fact that there may be a phase 4. We will be done. We anticipate being done with phase 3 by 2023.
But it depends on how phase 3 goes to figure out if there's in fact more work that needs to be done.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pio, you had a question on 01, anything on 01 through 06?
Yes, my question's on the 06, I believe. Is there funds in there for adding gasoline stations for boats, as well as dumping from the boats? Is that included in that?
In 06, to clarify, is just the transient marina development. Go ahead.
Well, what we did have the actual fuel pumps at the marina for the fast ferry, and what we did from an environmental due diligence standpoint, we found it was more risky for us as a municipality to actually run a fueling station, and we removed them. And it's not in our best interest to take on that risk from an environmental compliance standpoint, to have basically a fueling station on the water. Huge risk. You look at different DEC concerns, different EPA concerns, you look at speedy concerns, and what we've done in the past 10 to 15 years, we reduced the number of fueling stations that we had operating independently. If you look back over the years, we had fueling stations at all the fire stations that we removed. We had fueling stations at the cemetery that we removed. It's just a big risk and a big hit to us for having that type of exposure. And we removed them. Some say we shouldn't have done it, but we had 2 6,000-gallon tanks there, and right on the mouth of that of the marina development, and just one hit there would have cost us millions of dollars.
Thank you. Any others on 01 through 06? Okay, let's move on to the water system. Questions on W1 and W2, W1 distribution system, W2 water supply structures.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Lupian.
So we had a work session on this not too long ago about lead service lines and the LT2 compliance. I'm just wondering if these numbers for Cobb's Hill and for Highland are taking into account our request to defer LT2 in order to put that money into lead service lines, or if that's still outstanding.
That's still outstanding. We've met with the mayor. We briefed her on several occasions on that, and it's a big decision that not only is going to face Rochester but other municipalities, and that's why we did the work session actually last Thursday to bring you up to speed on that, so that everybody's on the same page. We have a number of decisions to make that's going to impact basically what we spend and how we spend it, and the actual quality of what we have going on.
So the
So I just want to be clear that the LT2 compliance is not a regulation, is a regulation that the federal government, EPA, have put on the city of Rochester that we must comply with for our water systems, given the fact that we have reservoirs that are uncovered at this point in time based on our water system. So it is not a matter of, so we have reached out to the federal government, asked them for a delay. I've sent a letter to them, and I know that other municipalities have as well, to allow us time, because this regulation came without, of course, any dollars. And so we cannot necessarily shift funding from this obligation that is a mandate from our federal government to a different space at this point in time until we get the clearance to do so.
Thank you. So does this funding allotted, is that for the covering of the reservoirs, or is it the treatment?
That's for us to look at the different options that are available. And as we talked about last week, there was the promulgation of the lead and copper rule by the EPA also that basically limits our flexibility on that. That means if we choose to use UV as the means of filtration, that means that we have to add a different chemical to it, a phosphate, that basically encourages algae, that increases the likelihood of algae, which wreaks havoc on our system. So basically, like the mayor said, we are in this dichotomy in which we have two competing mandates coming down from the same entity that are basically conflicting. So we've asked for some abeyance, we asked for some time so that we can really have a coherent strategy on how to move forward with this.
I want to say that, this is to me one of those essential things that is a priority, protecting our water and making sure we're complying with the mandated rules that have been brought down to us. And this was a very extensive work session that you guys put together to help us understand and lead us down the road of what this all looks like for protecting our water and complying with this L2 regulation that's been brought down. And we discussed as we go out further that there will be a community education piece around this as we begin to understand the options and how expensive those options are. I remember that very detailed. And I think covering was one of the ones that was really the most inexpensive and really met the needs that we have, but we'll determine that later. But I just want to say I'm grateful that you guys are continuing to stay steadfast with this, because this is something we don't want to get behind the 8-ball on. When we look at this pandemic, God forbid, the other worst thing that could happen is something with our water, of course. So, I think that this is important, that we're continually down this path. And I was grateful for the work session on this that really shined a lot of light. And I'm looking forward to be educating our community on this entire process as well.
I would just chime in, Council VP. I agree with all that you said. I'd also say that I think what makes this particularly challenging is that, I've only been on council for 2.5 years now, and I think that the EPA has changed their stance on this several times. I think under the Trump administration, the EPA has consistently been inconsistent. And I think that makes it very difficult for the city to weigh in one way or another on what to do. And so I think that the probably the best thing we can do is wait until hopefully on November, whatever, there's a new administration in Washington and we can get some clarity and make a plan for hopefully a more consistent EPA.
Well, we're going to make sure that our water is safe, and we are doing everything possible to comply with whatever rules and regulations come from the EPA. And we have a great water team that, from the Canadice and Hemlock Lake all the way down to what's happening right here on Felix Street. So we will continue to pay attention to it and make sure that we keep council up to date on any changes and any regulations that's coming down. I know that the team is constantly, I just signed a letter today regarding some of this. So we will continue to make sure that we do what's necessary to protect our water. One of the things, when we talk about covering may be cheaper to do, but I know that we've also heard from a lot of our neighbors up at Cobb's Hill Reservoir that they don't necessarily want the covering because they like the water feature in the middle of the reservoir and other things. So we have a lot of different interests that we have to weigh before we're able to make a decision, and we're going to make sure that we have public input and public comment, and it's the best fiscal decision possible for the city, the taxpayers of the city of Rochester.
And I would just say that on that note, I believe that we are the only city to have our reservoir in an Olmsted Park, which I think makes our decisions very different on this regard.
Oh, yes.
We can't even change the fencing around the reservoir.
That's
So
right.
you are definitely 100% right. We have so many different things to comply with when it comes down to things like that other people do not have to do.
right down to the number of blades of grass that you got. I'll move on to public safety. If there aren't anything else on the water. P1, P3, P1 apparatus, P3 small equipment. Questions?
I got one on P3.
Yep, Mr. Vice President,
I
P3.
would have something on apparatus, but it looks like the funding is staying unchanged there. But animal service equipment funding is unchanged. And I just want to, constantly advocate for our animal services who I've talked with them and on our facilities. I don't think I've seen it on the other part of here, but when it comes to equipment, I'm grateful to see that we're not changing already kind of struggling department, of our animal services. So I'm glad to see that we're keeping that funding unchanged and we keep supporting our animal service department. And I look forward to seeing in the future us doing even more support to our animal services.
And quick question on P3, but again, I don't need an answer now. I can get this in, we can get this in writing. Turnout gear looks like it increased by about 2 million over a 4-year period. Just what's driving that? Is it just cost or whatever, cost of the equipment or whatever that might be? Anything else on P1, P3?
Just a
Yeah, I have a
general question.
Oh, go ahead.
General question, Councilmember Patterson.
Just a general question on body worn cameras. What's our plan for the upgrade swap out?
It's a priority, and we will continue to make sure that we are upgrading and have that technology is definitely something that we're always continuing to evaluate, and we have to stay up to date with the body worn camera system. And when new cameras and other things come out, we have worked in changing those so that we're up to par with the latest technology.
Anything else on P5 technology?
Yes.
P6 fire motor equipment, P7
P3.
motor equipment?
P5.
Who's
I got
that?
one on P5.
Councilmember Harris? Go ahead,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes, I have one on P5. I'd just like to know what would be the county's contribution to the investment for the upgrades at the 911 center.
Director Soretto is on the line, and I know that he and the county's new Director of Public Safety, along with our IT team, have been working together to develop a plan on the communications upgrade, as well as a number of other issues with the CAD system and other technology upgrades that we have to do between our 911 center as well as police department and fire department. So I don't know if there is a final number as to what it will take, but I do know that they're working on a plan. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Director Soretto. You're on mute if you do. Can somebody unmute him?
Sorry about that. We're, like the mayor said, we're still in the process of putting this all together, and we don't have a final number at this point. But the county handles all the backbone financing.
Okay.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question regarding the upgrades. Does that include radio systems? What does that actually include? Is that CAD? What does that investment include?
I'm sorry. I'll have to get back to you on that when we get it all together.
So we're in the middle of the process. So just to give a history for those people that are new, for probably the last 6 years, we have been going back and forth with the county because, like with the Olmsted and the reservoir, the city is a little bit different animal when it comes down to the CAD system, when it comes down to emergency equipment, when it comes down to radios and also station alerting. And so we have been going back and forth for a number of years on this new technology upgrade. that the county is in lead of. We definitely have a great relationship with the county now to really get to the bottom of where we're going. And so we're in the beginning stages of that. We were further along in January, February, meaning they were meeting a lot. But then, of course, the situation that we're in pushed this project back a little bit. When we get more information, we'll be able to tell you exactly what's included, exactly who's covering what, and how that system is going to be implemented so that the city is kept whole, and our fire department as well as our police department and the equipment that we receive is what we need to protect and to manage our citizens.
So, thank you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Madam President, you had something, and then Council Vice President Lightfoot, Madam President.
Yes, on P3, scuba increases over 300% this year. Can you tell us what is generating that? And it's another 33% over out years.
Are we talking about the SCBA?
SCBA, yeah.
Okay, so the SCBA cost annually increases. So, you know, our SCBAs right now are coming up on 10 years old, so it's taking a lot more money to keep them active. The repair line and the replacement line for those has increased yearly. So we're just trying to stay in concert with the cost increase and the maintenance of the SCBA, the self-contained breathing apparatus that we use in the fire department.
So we had not had annual increases at all, or
no, we have, but you know, the equipment's starting to get older and we're starting to see a lot more costs associated with it. In past years, we've had to move money around to facilitate that. So now this year, we're trying to make sure that we have that line funded. You know, that's important to the firefighters, especially with the cancer risk that are going on now. So we want to make sure that that line is fully funded for the SCBAs.
And it may be in here, or it may not even relate, but given where we are with coronavirus, were there any changes that will be required in the firehouses in terms of the way they're structured or the way the quarters are set up that would require capital expenses? And if so, is that included in here?
So our firehouses were previously set up to mitigate, you know, people being in close quarters. We even have a couple of firehouses that have separate bunk rooms, so we don't have to worry about that. We're doing deep cleaning in the firehouses. We're doing deep cleaning of the apparatus. We've actually purchased some equipment to make sure that the apparatus is decontaminated like every other day. So that's the only expense that we've incurred at this time as far as keeping our equipment healthy and safe for our firefighters. We haven't had to do much because we were already pretty much set up to try and keep people safe and distance from each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you, Councilman Evans. I just wanted to piggyback on my colleague, Councilwoman Harris, on P5. I just wanted to ask the question of, as far as the relationships, I heard you, Mayor, express that the relationships were good. I was on the transition team for the new county executive, and this was one of the, and I co-chaired the public safety portion of that. This was one of the largest topics, was around the communications. And I was dealing with this when I was on the county ledge back in 2000 and whomever. I'm not even going to say how long ago that was. And this has been a topic back and forth even then. So I would like to just ask the question to Mike Soretto, sir. Are those, we were hopeful in drafting that transition document that is public, of course, that the relationships would be better and that we could we asked them to put a kind of a pause, if you will, on installing a lot of this equipment so that the negotiations could be better between the city and the county. Is that happening?
Yes, we're working very closely with county government on this issue. They've placed a CAD project under my direction. We've already put in place establishing different committees to move forward on this. working very well together on that. On top of that, with the radio, everything with the COVID and has been put on hold kind of with the radio project at this point until the new public safety director, he took over April 6th. So he's still in the process of getting that going. So I think everything is going as we planned in the committees that you were on.
That's good news to hear. I mean, when we look at this document, we say P5 technology, it's just this one little sentence that goes across, but I don't think people really understand the magnitude of this project and the impact it has across interdepartmental communications and for our public. So I'm glad to see that you guys are working well together, and I commend you. And we're going to be continuing to look very closely at this project. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank
sir.
you. Councilmember Lupien?
Yeah, this is on P6. And this is kind of a general ask as well as a specific one, I guess. But for fleet replacement, is there an opportunity to purchase electric vehicles when we replace our fleets to keep in track with our climate action plan?
Commissioner Jones, I know that we have made a commitment as it pertains to our climate action plan, and we are purchasing vehicles that are more efficient and that are in line with the environment with less emissions and other things. And so we have been also installing electric vehicle charging stations in our parking garages, as well as, of course, in our city hall lot. So the more that we can transition to electric vehicles, we will. Of course, some of these vehicles you cannot buy as an electric vehicle. But we're definitely considering that as part of our climate action plan. Commissioner Jones, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I have nothing else to add. You said it. Perfect.
Okay. I guess just to follow up, is there kind of an implementation plan for that specifically?
The climate action plan?
Oh, sorry, for replacing fleets with electric where possible.
Well, Councilperson Lupien, every application that we have that we can utilize an electric vehicle, we would utilize that. There's actual incentives for us to go through to make this happen. Government must lead the way. We have over 25 electric vehicles now. We've actually converted, we changed some of our actual heavy equipment from diesel to natural gas for our sweepers, for our refuse collection vehicles. And we've basically looked at alternative fuel vehicles. We have over 500 flex fuel vehicles in our fleet. And as a strategy, we use that as part of our climate action plan. And we're meeting many goals, and there'll be a great announcement coming out in the very near future about what we've done. So we're part of it. We are members of the Electrification Coalition. The mayor sponsored 2 years ago an actual, a tour of downtown with electric vehicles. We had 7 vehicles. We shut down the street at City Hall. We had all types of vehicles, from BMWs to Hondas. I think we even had no, we didn't have the Tesla, but we had vehicles there, and we're looking at all types of applications. I know the director of water, he gave away his 4x4 truck, and he drives an electric vehicle around. And we're really supporting that, and it's great for us to lead the way by practicing what we preach by purchasing these vehicles.
Absolutely. That's really great to hear, and I'm excited about the upcoming announcement. When you say flex fuel, is that like a plug-in, or not like a hybrid that you can use gas or not, or? E85
is a flex fuel.
Okay.
And we do have hybrid vehicles also, but E85 is considered a flex fuel. And it's also part of reducing our carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm. So for P6, it's the fire department sedans and station wagons. Are those specifically, do you know the type of vehicles those are going to be?
At this point in time, we generally either get it off of the state list or off of the there's a national list. But I want to commend our Department of Environmental Services not only for the climate action plan, but for really looking forward to reducing our fossil fuel and all of that. We have been leading the way when it comes down to NYSERDA. Rochester has been praised by NYPA. We have been recognized by many of the national organizations for the great work that Ann Spalding and her team has done when it comes down to looking at, you know, our infrastructure. We are a city that we have a solar field that have, you know, we've been drawing, that's fueling City Hall, and we're able to return things to the grid. We're looking at other opportunities to build more solar farms within the city and doing possibly community solar. We also have really looked at, of course, our vehicles when it comes down to hybrid vehicles as well as electric vehicles and other ways that we can be efficient when it comes down to climate change and what's happening around the community. But we have a great team within DES that's working on that and have been leading the way and nationally recognized for the great work that they're doing when it comes down to these issues.
Absolutely. And I'll mention the first time I ever met Commissioner Jones was a couple years ago when he spoke at a climate rally that we held with Mothers Out Front. So I know, I don't doubt his commitment.
Thank you.
I was going to say there's more to come.
More to come.
Yeah.
Great. You always got all kind of nice surprises coming, Commissioner Jones. We love it.
Hey,
The next,
Malik, I do have a question.
you have questions on the P section, Councilmember Pio?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
There has been concerns around the country about police looking more militaristic recently. With these upgrades, are we pushing that as well? Are we going to be upgrading police vehicles, police equipment to have that look and feel, or is that something our citizens should not have any concern about here locally?
I would say that we're not going to be purchasing any equipment to be more militaristic other than what we currently have to keep the public safe and keep our officers safe, if I understand your question. So we're not making any additional purchases and becoming more militaristic.
Actually, I think that we got rid of some equipment that was more militaristic a couple years ago. So the vehicles that we're purchasing are replacement vehicles, and we already released the design of those vehicles.
The new vehicles, correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Next section, let's go to the S's. S1, trail system, S2, urban forest, S4, recreation. Questions on the S sections?
Yeah, I have one question, Councilmember Evans.
Yeah.
So S1 trail system, we've done so much even in the last two and a half years of acquiring properties and making plans for trails. And I understand if this is one of the things that has to be deferred a little bit right now, but I'm just wondering what if there can be, and this could be something you follow up with afterwards in writing, but just wondering what the long-term plan for some of these trails are, things that we actually acquired land from CSX and now don't have the ability to actually move forward on the trail, what the timing of those things might be.
Well, our hope is that we may not be able to move forward on some of this, and some of these we still have to do some acquiring of land. But in the 21-22 that we would be able to really start to do some design and construction. As you know, with the El Camino Trail, the running track bridge, we secured dollars. We is shoring it up right now, making some investments to make sure that if we decided to put in and was able to get a grant or something to put in the full investment, we'd be able to do that. And so our hope is that in the upcoming years, and given I know the governor's commitment to, to trailways and to connecting different communities, that's something that they have been looking at. So we'll continue to apply for grants and hopeful that there will be a way for us to accelerate this. But our plan is that in the next year CIP that we'll be able to complete some of these projects.
Councilmember Lupian, you had something on S4?
Yeah. In regards to parcel 5, I see that the amount of money anticipated to be spent on that is 21 million. So I'd like to know the anticipated scope of that project. And also, since it won't really be implemented until 2022, are there some temporary or low cost improvements we can make to that space to make it more of a usable gathering space in the 2 years in between?
So that's something that we're definitely looking at as it pertains to preserving this space and making it available and more usable for concerts, because ultimately we are, it's one of the things that the planning department is looking at, going out and getting and gathering information and doing design charrettes with the community, because the situation that we're in now, that plan has been pushed back. But I think that Doreen Kirkmeyer and her team are looking at ways in which we can engage the community while we're in this particular state of affairs. So right now we are looking at ways to possibly put something that is, a different type of surface there. But it will all depend on, we have to remember that there is a parking garage up underneath parcel 5. And so drainage and other things have to be considered when doing something on that site, that, ordinarily would not be something that we would have, a challenge that we would have to deal with in an ordinary state.
Okay. And I'll probably just get the scope in writing later. The other thing I wanted to know is with play apparatus, as well as spray park and tennis courts, can I get a list of the kind of the parks that those are being prioritized at in the coming years?
Sure.
Thank you.
Anything else on S1 through S4?
Sure.
S1 through S4?
Yes, sir.
S5?
Question.
Mike
Oh, go ahead,
Patterson.
Okay.
I
Okay,
think,
is that?
no,
is that-
it's Vice President Lightfoot, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, Vice President Lightfoot, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted, with the El Camino this year we saw, or last summer, we saw a lot of news articles about the Conky Cruisers, and I know they utilize that facility. Is this having any impact on that program and that usage?
Actually, the executive director of Conky Cruisers had fallen ill for a period of time. I think that she switched from a bike program and has been more looking at tennis. And so I have not spoken to her about what her intent for the upcoming year will be, but we will continue. And I know that that Karen St. Aubin and her team last year had been doing a lot of cleanup every other day, I believe, working with Ibero and the Project Hope Neighbors, as well as some other folks. As we know, we have some challenges in that area, and we will make sure that we continue to monitor it and put the resources that we need to make sure that the trail is clear.
Thank you. S5 public market, S6 cemeteries, S7 bicycle enhancements. I got a chat from Councilmember Lupian. You had a question?
Yeah, I guess a repeat of my question for the bicycle enhancements, if I could get a list of the, what's prioritized in the next 2 years.
Yes.
I think actually sharing some of the stuff that the DES team has already shared about the bicycle boulevards network, because this is predominantly, S7 is predominantly the bicycle boulevards network, right? Correct, Commissioner Jones? It'll be adding things like the bollards and the street calming to those particular roadways. Is that right?
That's correct.
I think sharing that with the whole
Right.
council will be great. Very excited about that project. It's fantastic.
And once again, we will upgrade everybody, update everyone on what we're doing, the Complete Streets program, how that's incorporated in everything that we do. And bicycling is such an important part of the life in Rochester. And that's displayed by having, cycle tracks on East Main Street as part of that development.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm excited about that.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yeah, thank you. Can you just refresh my memory on the plans for the public market? I know we've done extensive work on it throughout the last few years. And I know at one point in time, there were plans for the front half by the Union Street side in terms of additional retail in that front area. Is that something where we've unfortunately just not been able to come to fruition, or is that still on the table for the future? In terms of additional retail and opportunities for that front half, that I guess the parking lot that we were looking at doing some additional things.
Commissioner Torres?
Yes, at this time, what we're completing is we're doing an assessment right now. There are a number of properties that have changed ownership, contiguous and in the market district. We really want to make sure we have a handle on what's available in current real estate in the market area before we talk about doing any kind of RFP for additional buildings. So that process is underway right now, and we'll have more that we can report out and discuss when we've received that assessment.
Do we
Additionally, one of the challenges, of course, with the public market is parking. And so we have heard a lot from, many of the neighbors that are on the other side, on the Railroad Street side and the Peck and First, Second, and Third Street that, in the summertime really, so taking away any parking at this point in time without having a plan on how to have people come enjoy the public market without blocking other people's driveways and other things. So that's why we have also taken a step back from really pushing more development in the only really clear parking area that we have.
So, okay, well, so I have a different question on that then, so have we found, so if we're talking about parking, that the huge parking lot that we created from Union to SIO is not sufficient at this time? Because it usually seems like there's still capacity even on heavy days. Is that not the case for?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. That is not enough parking. We still get a number of complaints from the Railroad Street side, and that's on the other side. So people that utilize the SIO to Union parking, but we're talking about on the Railroad First, Second, Third, that area over there, Peck Street. Many of those neighbors often are very concerned about parking on heavy Saturday mornings and when the public market is being utilized.
Okay. And one last question on this is, I hear you in terms of changing ownership of the buildings. Have we done an actual inventory of the spaces that are in the public market right now, those ones that line the side where all the coffee shops and things are, in terms of what available spaces there are currently?
That's part of the assessment that we're currently doing right now. So we will have the results of that assessment soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Madam President, you had a question on the S section?
Yes, on cemeteries. There is no capital for 2021 for anything in the cemeteries?
Madam President.
Sir?
I knew you would not miss that. And the budget director, Chris Wagner, would tell you that. My staff would tell you that also. Here's what we're doing. We've had some resources that were set aside to implement the results of the Martha Lyons report. That's the one that came in that emphasized columbariums, scattering gardens, and we're in the process of finishing that design and implementing the actual construction on that. So we have enough funds this year, existing funds for this year to forego capital for the upcoming round. But next year we'll be knocking on the door saying we need capital for other things at the cemeteries. But this was just something that to get us through this very trying budget cycle. But I knew that was going to be a question that's going to be asked by someone, and we have a good plan in place. Martha Lyons, that report was you guys actually extended or amended her agreement to allow additional funds so she can basically put together the actual bid documents so we can go out and bid the actual recommendations from her study, which is going to extend the life cycle of the cemetery and bring in more revenue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else on the S section, let's move on to economic development. E2, downtown enhancement district, E3, neighborhood development, E4, land acquisition, E6, environmental compliance, E7, housing, and E8, focused investment. So let's just take questions on all of section E. Questions? I see Councilmember Lupian, you had a question.
I do. I wanted to ask about Project Phoenix. So we are not going to be funding that this year. And I guess wanted to advocate that, it really fits in with our workforce development, but also, ensuring that people of color are getting access to well-paying union jobs. I'm wondering if, I guess that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, so let me just start by saying we are absolutely committed to partnering and supporting Project Phoenix. It's one of our top priorities. We've been working with Greenberry all year to try to find out what is the best fit of that partnership. As you know, right now that the dust has landed on their partnership with the Community Land Trust. And because of that, we haven't been able to spend this year's $50,000. We can't support financially the Community Land Trust's project. They're a contractor just like all our other partners out there. So, initially we had envisioned with Project Phoenix, we would give them vacant properties, they would rehab them, we would auction them or lottery them to the people on the street. That didn't quite work out because then they would have had to take ownership. They didn't want to take ownership. Then we tried to work out an agreement where we could have them doing rehab work on owner-occupied properties, and we would grant the resources to the owner and they would bring the labor to the table. And that didn't quite work out because they have to have all their leg credentials in order to be a contractor for us. So we're still working on that end of it, and hopefully they can get the credentials they need to do that. But right now they're kind of tied up with the Community Land Trust partnership. So to be able to, once they break off from that or be able to build capacity to do more than that, we'll be there to support it. And we're going to keep ongoing conversations with Kareem because, like I said, this is a real top priority for us.
Understood. Yeah, I agree with you. So the funding isn't unrestricted. It's more tied to specific work that we would have them do.
Yeah, well, it's about constructing what the funding is going to be for, right? So
Right.
it's evolutionary. We're trying to figure it out as we go, but we're not going to stop trying to figure it out.
And we have I think that the big point here is that we have dollars currently available for Project Phoenix, $50,000 now. So that's why you don't see it in 2021. As I mentioned earlier, just because something has a zero under it doesn't not necessarily mean that it's not going to get done or not be supported. There may be dollars that was allocated previously for this project that have not been encumbered yet. And so that's the reason why it's zero now. And we're hopeful that in this coming budget year that those projects that we were working on and working with the Community Land Trust on will be able to be funded with Project Phoenix. And then in 21-22, we will go back to the CIP.
Let me just add one last thing. So what we're trying to work out with them now is the way we can support them, currently is possibly through equipment purchases and supplies, things that they need for their interns to be successful as they progress through the program. So we're working out the details of that, and we'll have to enter into a contract to do that, but that's what we're looking at right now.
That's great news. Yeah, I wasn't sure when it said Project Phoenix is delayed until 21-22 what that meant. So that's great. I also had a question on demolition with the 1.8 million that we're anticipating spending. And I guess this is a general question. Is there a way that we can invest the money that we would into demolition into the house and then allow homeowners to use the grants available to fix them up? Would that be a better use of that money?
Yeah, so, demolition, let me just say that we're in a pretty good shape with demolition in terms of distressed structures. Our city's come a long way. There was a time where we had 400 city-owned properties that need to be demolished. We're now balancing a budget of possibly 80 to 100 a year, both city and private. So we're in really decent shape on what needs to be demolished. That said, any type of continued development effort, which we are actively developing in our city, has to be inclusive of getting rid of the worst structures. The worst structures financially, you can't make the numbers work from a rehab perspective. Nobody can make it work, right? Before we decide to demolish anything we own, we offer opportunity to all of our partners, right? And so it's only in the absence of being able to find a partner who can make those numbers work, do we then pursue the other arm of our department in form of demolition. So I think that we minimally demolish. If you look at comparatively to other cities our size, I think that we're doing a pretty good job of not being overly aggressive with it. But you have to have some form. When you're adding 1,900 residential units since 2015, something has to come out of that equation.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Can you actually tell us with this figure that how many we're anticipating would this cover?
For the demolition? So the demolition program is unimpacted, and you're going to hear this if you have other questions on the NBD items. What we did was we stepped back before we even made these decisions and looked at our on-hand cash, on-hand funds. So none of the NBD programs are going to be impacted by these decisions. We have enough funds on hand to compensate for this year's activity. So for demo, we jacked up the CDBG to 1.8, and we have about 700 on hand after this current demo bid package. So we're not going to be impacted in terms of meeting our obligation and our numbers in demo. And they will all be clean demos.
And how many properties would this represent?
So we still budgeted for 100.
Okay, great. Thank you.
How far are you going down, Councilman? How far in the E's are you going?
I'm taking all of E and just one question I had, and then I'll get to Councilmember Gruber and Lightfoot. Is around, I know Bull's Head is listed in that section. Could you talk a little bit about what's going on there, and if it needs to be longer, it could be followed up in writing, but go ahead.
So we can give you an update on where the project is in writing. All we did here is shift from cash to debt. So
right.
The project itself is unimpacted by these decisions. It's moving forward. I was on a call actually an hour ago about our next step for the two properties where we're going to let them retain ownership, and working out the details of what that's going to look like. So we're actively involved at Bull's Head.
Great. Anything else on E?
Yep, right here.
Councilmember Gruber, E.
Yes, and I just piggyback on Councilmember Evans, and I'm sorry to be a broken record on this, Commissioner Kirkmeyer. I feel like I ask it every time, but I don't feel like I understand the long-term plan for Bull's Head. I know there's a lot of stuff that's currently being held up by some of the stuff related to the eminent domain over there and some of the properties, and I recognize that. But I think during the last council session, I asked for, there was something about like a visionary, a vision packet or something that had already been done by the NBD. And I'd love to make sure that we as council can get that. I feel like we've asked for it and not received it recently. Or if we did receive it, I lost it. So I'll take the blame for it. Thank you.
We'll make sure that you get that. You know, because Bull's Head is an urban renewal district, there's a lot of community engagement, a lot of different sessions that we had to go through. There are, of course, different plans because of some of the properties that may stay, may not stay. There's a lot of environmental concerns with those properties. We had to do a lot of acquiring of land as well. And so we can give you a detailed report from the beginning to now of exactly what we've done. And there are some, hopefully, there's some designs or conceptual plans, designs that the community have looked at. We did look at and talk to some developers about you know, a master being a program manager for Bull's Head. And then, you know, so you would hire a program manager that would basically be the operator and the owner of the project for the city or on behalf of the city. So we're looking at different options right now. One of the, of course, projects is working with Rochester Regional, and we have a number of seniors that want to age in place, and creating some senior housing availability so that they can be in connection with the Rochester St. Mary's facility that's right across the street. And so there's a number of different moving parts to this, but we'll give you a detailed report of where we were and where we are now, and all of the different levels of community engagement that we've gone through and community meetings that we've had up to date on Bull's Head.
Thank you. I would just to correct myself, I think that everyone's been wonderful about getting us the information on what's been done and the community engagement that's happened. I have plenty of documentation about that. The thing that you just said about the senior housing and aging in place and relationship with St. Mary's, that's the first I've heard of that. So of course, none of it is necessarily set in stone, but getting some idea of what the visioning has been and what the plans might be in the next 2, 3, 4 years. I think that's really what I would request, some written assessment of that. I just have 2 questions on E, and then I'll ask them both back to back, and then I'll be quiet. One of them is related to the BOAs and the brownfields generally that the city has been doing a lot of great work on cleaning up and getting ready to be developable. I just want to understand how you all are planning for the impact of probably a cash-strapped federal and state government, and how that's going to impact our ability to get those things done. And second, when it comes to affordable housing, I understand that those zeros don't mean we're not doing any. I just want to know, has there been conversations with places like GRHP and Habitat, who usually are the ones who do a lot of the developing on with these programs, and are they well aware that they might not have the same funding and ability to do it this upcoming year? Thank you.
So I can deal with the housing, and then Commissioner Jones can deal with the BOA. So yes, we absolutely have engaged. So like the Home Rochester program, certainly the partnership is aware of what we're doing and the direction we're going. Based on the funds we have on hand and based on what's in the pipeline to close this year, we're confident that we're going to be able to, support the projects that are in the pipeline. Same with acquisition. We have cash on hand to acquire and to participate in all the projects that we have on our agenda for this year. So none of that's going to be impacted. Shifting over to the home buyer program, that funding that's in CIP is for our 81 to 120% AMI population of customers. We have several $100,000 on hand to serve that population, which will definitely get us through this year. The population under 80% is served by home funding, and the home funding is unimpacted. So again, there's not going to be any impact to the level of service in NBD with any of these programs.
Thank you.
Anything else on? I'm sorry, on the brownfields, Commissioner Jones.
Yes. Councilperson Gruber, we're committed to do our environmental due diligence on all properties that come into our under our responsibility as part of any brownfield cleanup actions. And until they tell us that there's no funding, we're going to continue to do that due diligence. We have a number of consent or decrees that are in place that we're acting on now. One is actually at at that area that you're talking about, Bull's Head. But so we're going to continue to do our environmental due diligence on every property as part of our work procedures or our MO.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else on E?
Yeah.
Councilmember Lupian.
Thank you. I know there's been a lot of really great work around the BOA on Flint Street, the old vacuum oil site. Just wonder if I could get a status of that project.
Yes, we'll get that to you.
And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else on E before I move to public art? Okay, we'll move to the arts and culture section. A1, public art. Any questions on public art?
I have a question.
Councilmember Lupian.
Thank you. I'm interested to get a kind of a status on Charles Carroll of what we'll be able to do this year. And also a second question, how are we ensuring that smaller scale artists and artists of color are getting engaged for public art being done?
So as it pertains to Charles Carroll Plaza, we have all the funding. I think that this is we have all the funding to do that project. It's now in design phase, and I think that we may be going out to bid for actual construction in the next couple weeks or months. As it pertains to our installation, we have our city rock art program through our recreation program. Sean Dunwoody is a local artist that does a lot of work for the city of Rochester. He's out there right now doing some of our Protect Your Circle campaign. And so we definitely have made a concerted effort to engage artists and also influencers that are typically not a part of a larger circle. And most of our art installation happens by people of color and in conjunction with our DRY's art team. And so that's not something that we have had a challenge with getting people of color engaged in. We also have the FWA crew that have done some work for us at the High Falls location, High Falls Park, and we will continue to engage different artists as we do those different installations.
That's great. That's really important. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on public art? Okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Councilmember Ortiz.
Yeah, I have two questions. What specifically is Sister Cities art? So that's the first question that I have.
Art located at the Sister Cities garage.
Oh, at the garage. Okay, when I see Sister Cities, I keep thinking the actual program. That's why I was like, okay, all right, so the garage, all right. And then my other question is, I know that this has been a long time topic, but I was just wondering, because there were several different focus groups and all those kinds of things that were happening, have we gotten any closer to taking a look at the whole 1% policy?
Yes, actually we engaged with a number of our smaller art groups. Justin and the deputy mayor, we put together people from the African American as well as the Latino community to start a session on discussing the 1% Art Fund and how we could do that and utilize that. I'm not sure if the director of communications is on the line, but if he wants to speak, is he on the line? I don't see him. No, he isn't. James, do you have anything to add to that? But we can get back to you on that, because I know that before this pandemic happened, that was one of the things that we were engaged in.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Mayor. We were engaging and then going to lay out a process. We've been a bit derailed with the coronavirus for the past couple months now. But we will be continuing that effort so that we can move forward to maximize the 1% for our.
Okay, all right. Well, definitely, I know it's a huge interest to many. Look forward to getting any kind of proposals or drafts on how we might actually be able to move that forward.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on public art in general? A1, okay. Next one is public facilities. Let's look at F1, Blue Cross Arena, F2, High Falls, and F3, Soccer Stadium. Questions? Going once?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Gruber.
Thank you. Just curious about the with the youth sports. I'm assuming that I mean, obviously, in terms of F3, we're deferring some of the funding from this year, but in the second line, we're taking out some debt as well. I'm just wondering if I can get a sense of how this funding is going to align with the external funding that we've received, I believe from the Community Foundation and Ralph Wilson, and if that timing changes at all.
The youth sports facility is currently under construction. So the Ralph Wilson Foundation and Community Foundation dollars are currently being used right now for the McGuire building. As you know, that's the first phase, and many of our projects will be done in different phases. So the first phase is to take care of the McGuire building, get that upgraded, and that's happening right now. And I don't know if Commissioner Torres, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, just that the funding that is allocated here in the CIP is what we discussed when we announced the plan and the funding in January. So this is the remaining portion of what is needed to complete that project. But as the mayor said, the Ralph Wilson funding, as well as the funding that had already been secured, is being used right now, and this is the remaining funding.
Great. So it's safe to say then that essentially, regardless of what's happening economically or with our budget, the youth sports complex is something that this administration is prioritizing, and there's really been no impact or delay on its progress.
Yes, that's safe to say. Partly because we're already in the process of doing it and we need to complete it. So you can't, because we're in the process of actually facilitating and under construction right now, we need to complete this particular facility. I can say, I can't tell you that if we were not in construction and doing this already, that this would have probably risen to the top on some of the team's minds, but we're already in the middle of construction. The project needs to be completed, and it definitely is a priority to get it done so that our youth can utilize it.
Thank you.
Anything else on F1, F2, F3?
I have two questions. Also about the youth sports training facility. Is there an anticipated revenue for the 2021 season? And if so, can we get that?
That's something that we can get to you when we do our the operating budget plan.
Wonderful. And I don't know if this is the right place to say this or not, but I saw in last year's questions that they asked for a narrative and status of the Rock the Riverway projects. And I think that would be a really useful thing for me to see for this year as well, if that's possible.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Last year, I said that they council asked for a narrative and status on the Rock the Riverway projects. And it would be good for me to see that for this year as well, if that's possible.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Anything else on F1, F2, F3? Okay, what about on F4, the Port of Rochester, and F5, the Joseph A. Floriano Riverside Convention Center?
So I have a question on the convention center.
Okay, Council Member Ortiz.
Thank you. And perhaps this is all pulled together with the Rock the Riverway, but you have the 70,000 that looks like for renovation and for the convention center, but I know that the ideas and plans were obviously much more extensive than that. But I don't see that it's planned out at all on here. Is that something that is part of that document, or is that something that's going to have to wait altogether, even though it's not able to do much now? Obviously, it is a huge economic driver for the future. So
the first Rock the Riverway project was the Rochester Riverside Promenade that was completed. We did a ribbon cutting that is done right now. The convention center was I believe opened in 1984. There are upgrades and facility improvements that need to happen on the inside. As you know, last year, the year before last, the escalators broke down. There's rugs, there's other fixtures within the building that need to be improved. So this is really about just maintenance and keeping the convention center up to par. As a facility that can be used for our business community. There are other plans, of course, that depend on having additional funding that the convention center has been talking about and working on with the convention center board. And so that has not come necessarily to fruition yet. But as it pertains to the Rock the Riverway portion of this, that part of the convention center project was done. There may be additional phase when we get to connecting the convention center to the Broad Street Aqueduct that will be in the future if we are able to secure those dollars. Right now, we are actually at the library, the Rundle Library Terrace. That is what's under construction, which is another Rock the Riverway project, along with the skate park and a number of different projects that are underway. But the first Rock the Riverway project for the convention center has been completed.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I remember that. I was just thinking of the plans for like basically the second story and those type of things that we were hoping to do. But okay, future plans. All right, thank you.
And Mayor, this is Chris. I just wanted to clarify the $5 million in debt that we're showing in the first year there. That's actually, I think, for the South Terrace project. You know, Commissioner Jones, do you want to touch base on that at all?
Where are you, Chris? I'm not seeing that.
On page 8-4.
Oh, okay. You're on a different page than me.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, 8-4 is part of the next phase where we're going to do work on the actual. There's a space on the South Promenade where we're going to cantilever over and provide additional convention space, and also do work on the retaining wall that's underneath the actual promenade that needs to have work on it. And we're receiving about $5 million from the Rock the Riverway campaign to do that. And that will lead also to the ability to connect to the Broad Street Aqueduct once that's completed.
Thank you. Anything else on F1 through F5?
Councilmember Lupien, the aqueduct, you know, a lot of the Rock the Riverway projects are so exciting, and the aqueduct one is certainly an interesting project. I know that there's a lot of community love for the art that's currently there, and is there any opportunity to make that a part of this project?
Absolutely. Yes. That was a big discussion in phase 1 of the Rock the Riverway project. And of course, we had Sean Dunwoody and some other folks that were advocating for that. So definitely, depending on what ultimately happens with that space, if we have the funding, the arts, and the love of being able to create different ideas down there, will be part of what we do.
That's really great to hear, and I know a lot of people will be happy to hear that as well.
Thank you. F1 through F5, anything else? Okay, we'll move on to municipal facilities. M1 and M2, M1 City Hall, M2 Operations Center Complex. Any questions on M1, M2? I feel like I'm playing Battleship with these numbers. You guys remember Battleship? Come on.
Yes, I do. You will not be
Well, we don't-
sinking my ship.
That's right. I was just gonna say, we don't want to sink any battleships. No.
No,
It's
we
also a
trying to
major
stay
motion
afloat
picture.
here.
That's right. That's right.
Battleship.
Anything on M1, M2?
You never heard of Battleship, Commissioner Jones? We
No.
have got to get him Battleship.
okay.
Well played.
Commissioner
Oh my
Jones,
goodness.
man, come
That
on.
must have been a 70s, 80s baby game.
Right,
Because
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
They made it into a major motion picture, Commissioner.
That's
Entire movie
Chief
based on a board game.
Singletary knows what Battleship is about, right?
That's
I
right.
do. I even know that, Nora.
Mayor, when this is over, we're gonna have a session with Commissioner Jones at City Hall. And we're gonna have him play Battleship.
That's actually one of those games that you can play over Zoom.
That's right.
Oh yeah, it is. Yes,
That's
it
right.
is.
So, anything on M1 or M2?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay,
If
M1,
anybody
M2.
wants to go ahead of me, they can.
Go ahead, Commissioner. Go ahead, Councilmember Lupian.
Okay. I'm just out of curiosity interested in the city clerk public counter improvements and what those might be.
So I believe that Hazel is on the line, but I can try to start. A number of years ago, there was a study that was done that for ADA compliance and other changes need to happen to the city clerk's information desk right there on the first floor. And that would be the upgrades to that area to make sure that those improvements are made for our customers as well as for our employees, and that it's ADA compliant. But Clerk Hazel Washington is on the line and can talk a little bit more in detail about that.
Yes, Mary, Councilmember Lupian, they are going to take a look at it, that area, because the study was done back in 2012. So there may be some revisions to the original plan. And the mayor did a great job describing our project.
Absolutely. I recall years ago when we did the first counter job, and that was in the 90s, and the actual ADA rules and requirements have changed. And we're going to take on an ergonomic study, not only from an ADA standpoint, but also from a workforce standpoint, making sure that they're working in the most ergonomically successful manner possible. So that's going to help that entire area.
And President Scott made sure that it was a priority.
Thank you, President Scott.
Yes, thanks,
That's
President
awesome.
Scott.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm always fascinated by how many details you hold in your head and how really easy you are to rattle off what's going on in every single department. It's kind of incredible.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, I have two more questions. One it's about the rec center. These two questions I'm gonna not take credit for. They were in last year's questions, but I would be interested in their outcomes this year. One is an org chart for each of the rec center for the last 3 years, showing the title and then position. And also the residency info for employees that are required to live in the city.
Okay, we'll make sure that we give that to you.
Thank you.
Anything else on M1, M2? Okay, recreation and park facilities and anything on M3, M4, M5? Okay.
Councilor Evans, sorry.
Yes, Councilmember Gruber, go ahead.
Lost you for a second. I just want to ask the mayor, and I believe that Director Utaro is on the phone, is on the call as well, about obviously there had to be some looks like there's some hard, unfortunate cuts to CIP and the branch and the central locations. I'm just wondering, just for this year, obviously, then it seems to go back in future years. I'm wondering what the plan is to be able to, or if that's going to have a major negative impact on what it may be.
I will turn it over to the library director, but some of these items could be deferred. And on some of this, we have some other dollars that are currently available. So, Patty, if you could specifically answer Councilman Gruber's question. If not, then we'll make sure that we get you that information.
Sure. Mayor, you're absolutely correct in saying that a number of our projects can be deferred. One of the very difficult things that we've had to do this year is related to a reduction of $20 million in statewide library construction funding. The amount that we were expecting to have through that program initially was $1 million. Our allocation for the entire county is less than $550,000. We just received that news last week. So the really significant cut to statewide construction funding is affecting our ability to complete projects this year. And as you could see, we were very pleased with being able to defer out into the out years.
Great. I don't need anything else in writing, Mayor. I wanted to sometimes I just want to hear from people that despite the fact that this is going to be a tough year, that things like our libraries are going to be okay. And I appreciate hearing that from Patty.
Well, thank you for the question. It gives us an opportunity just to make sure that we, if you're thinking about it, that means that many of our citizens are thinking the same thing. So it gives us an opportunity to make sure that we provide them with the right information.
Councilor Evans, I had one other question on the M section. I don't know if are you going line by line or you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Wow, I just learned that you can hit the space bar, and if you hit M, it mutes. Yeah, if you want to go through, if you have questions on the other M's, feel free.
I just had one question on M7. I know a couple of years ago, I think that the council had agreed to sell, I believe, 2 of the garages. I think we did not agree to sell the east end, but 2 others we did, or maybe one of them was a long-term, like a 30 or 50-year lease or something like that. And it doesn't seem like any of those things actually ended up happening. And I know the city has, the administration has goals to reduce the amount of maintenance fees on garages. I just want to understand where we are on those 2 other sales that council agreed on and what the plan is moving forward.
So you're 100% right. The East End garage was one of the garages that we had up for sale, and council did not accept the bid on that. So we still are maintaining the other 2 garages were Mortimer Street and Charles Carroll. And so things changed for the people that were looking to purchase Mortimer Street. As you know, it was a joint proposal between Wind Development as well as CGI. And so Wind Development really wanted to focus on the improvements of the Sibley building before going forward with the purchase of the garage. And as you know, we got the funding for Rock the Riverway. And we would have to take a number of different parking spaces offline for the Charles Carroll garage. And so we wanted to make sure that we finished that garage first and the changes to the Charles Carroll Park before actually selling it. The buyer is still interested in the garage, but because we would be taking a number of the parking spaces offline while we reconstruct that garage, and it's a significant investment, as you know, it's about a $23 million investment. We wanted to wait until after we did that in order to really sell that, and we would probably be coming back to council with some types of approval if the pricing on that changes.
Thank you. Do you anticipate putting any other garages up for sale? And you know, I certainly was against selling the East End garage to that particular buyer at that particular moment. But I mean, is that garage still on the market? Are we still trying to sell things?
Right now, we are not trying to sell any of the garages. We have been working with the downtown management. We're trying to look at possibly a downtown management entity and some other different options that would allow us to take some of the maintenance and the long-term debt that is required for garages off of the city's books. And that is something that we're exploring. But right now we have no plans to put any of the garages back up for sale in the next year.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else on M1 through M8? Okay, if not, we'll move to the next section, which is business equipment. And we'll just do all of business equipment, B1 through B97. B1 is office equipment, B2 is small equipment, B3 is technology, B4, B5, business equipment, client technology, and B96, network, telecommunications and security, and B97 is security and surveillance. So anyone that has any questions on any sections in B, please feel free to ask them now.
I just have one. I'm curious because of, I mean, COVID has obviously changed a lot about workflows, but I think that post-COVID world is going to see a lot more working from home for a lot of different people. Is there, I mean, are we preparing for that? You know, at my employer, for example, we're trying to issue as many laptops as we possibly can to make sure people can work from home. Is the city engaging in things of that nature?
So we are so thankful that we have a director of IT and that was able to, and an IT team that was able to switch us around very quickly. We have, when we recognized that there were problems in the system, they were able to correct those. We are preparing. We do know that getting back to what was normal post-COVID is going to be very different. So we have all of our commissioners have a plan. We are working to make sure that all of our employees have the equipment that they need. Additionally, our HR department and HR training department had developed a number of different training tools and professional development tools online that would be able to allow our employees to continue to get professional development as well. So we were able, I believe, if Albert or Bill is not online, I think Bill is here, to get our employees at least about 600 laptops within 2 weeks. We were able to upgrade the VPN system so that people could log in and not have the different challenges that the limitations and get the work done. We are, of course, looking at upgrading a lot of the IT systems. We still are on the mainframe. We can talk more about that in the budget that's going to be forthcoming. But the IT department under Albert and with Bill's help was able to really do a yeoman's job of getting our employees what they needed. We still, of course, government is an essential service. Our employees are still coming into work. They're coming in on a rotating basis that the commissioners have outlined to make sure that we're maintaining social distancing. We also are giving out masks when people walk in any of the buildings to be in compliance with the regulations that the governor has set forth if they do not come in with the mask. So we are doing everything possible to make sure that we have the proper PPE as well as the laptops and the systems that will be able to handle the work of the people post-COVID. And I don't know, Bill, if that's something that you want to add to, because I just saw you pop up on my screen.
Can I just, Bill,
Go ahead.
before you answer, can I
Sure.
just reiterate my question? I think all that is amazing. I think we all of us know how much you all have done so quickly. I guess my question about this CIP budget is, are there investments we as a city need to still make to be able to continue to allow people to work from home moving forward?
So I'll just comment on that, Councilmember Gruber. So one of the things that we were very, very fortunate in, we had teed a lot of these projects up prior to COVID happening. So for example, all the VPN servers that we had planned to replace, we accelerated that. Our Office 365 environment, we had teed that up to start rolling that out quickly. I think to your point, however, I think we're in a very good position. I don't think we'll ever go backwards. I think we've kind of set a new standard. I think working from home has become kind of standard. I think these kinds of environments will become more standard all the time. I think this city, because I've been working with CIOs from some of the other cities. I'm on some statewide groups. The city of Rochester, I would say, is in pretty good shape compared to a lot of cities to continue through the COVID-19 issue and to sort of carry this forward.
Thank you. I would just ask that if someone from IT can help me get a background like President Scott's, I would appreciate that at some point.
We all want that background.
And I definitely still want to answer part of your question. I think that we left out, and that was about equipment and laptops. And I don't know if Bill, you wanted to answer, do we
Sure.
we need more equipment, more laptops and computers for at home
Yeah.
sort of
So can
information?
everybody hear me okay? Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
really.
we can hear.
Sure.
You're cutting in and out a little bit. But go
No,
ahead.
is this any, is this worse? Is this okay?
Yeah, that's better.
My
Yeah, go ahead.
internet's kind of being weird right now, so I apologize. Can you hear me?
Must not have green light.
You need green light. Yeah, that's right.
No?
Go
Hello?
ahead.
Go ahead,
Go
Bill.
ahead.
No? Okay. So, yeah, we've been moving toward laptops at a regular pace. This has done nothing but accelerate it. For example, Mayor, to your point, when we had to scramble and get laptops for people, everybody we had to scramble and get a laptop for, I'm going to make sure they have one moving forward. I don't want to go through this again, and as we move forward, we'll be much more diligent about finding out what the right equipment is for each person.
Thank you, Bill. Albert,
Thank
did
you,
you have
Bill.
something to add to that? I didn't know.
Well, I would just say that, I think we responded pretty well during the sort of initial phases of this. I think we rolled out somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 laptops within the first week and a half. Bill's team did a really, really great job. His folks were working, 14 hours a day to get those things rolled out, and in many cases delivering them personally to people. That's just kind of continued. There's been sort of a steady stream. There are some things we're struggling with now, like the lack of cameras. A lot of people want cameras on their laptops if they didn't have them before, cameras or on their desktop. Right now, there's just an incredible shortage of cameras. So we're still struggling with some of that. But all in all, I think we're meeting the demand pretty well. We've sort of confiscated laptops from every corner of the organization. I don't think there's anybody today who has wanted a laptop who hasn't got one.
Thank you. President Scott, you had something on the business equipment section?
Yes. I noticed that we don't have anything in there for blue light cameras, and I'm a little bit surprised because that's sort of been the bane of our existence for years, that they were always they were broken, that they needed replacing. So how is it that we don't have anything allocated for that?
Chief?
Well, I think the number of cameras that we kind of have, we always kind of monitor and see the number of personnel that we have to actually watch the cameras within the camera room. I think the ones that we currently have are sufficient, and also we can able to move certain cameras around, particularly where they're covert cameras. We can put cameras in places of the city where they may be needed. I don't know if that kind of answers the question there, but right now we do believe we have a sufficient number of cameras. The maintenance for the cameras, I think this year has not been to the number where we've seen in years past.
Why do you think that is?
As far as
it being less demanding than previously, because that was really a loud cry from the neighborhood groups.
Because I think that many of those neighborhoods that were crying out for those cameras actually have received them. And so, that hasn't been something that we, I've gotten a lot of calls about. So we tried to make sure that those neighborhood associations and those blocks that wanted those cameras up had them, and we have them installed in many of the most challenged parts of the city where we have a lot of activity. And of course, we would have to say that just the last, not the last, but the murder that happened on Clifford Avenue, had it not been for a camera that was right there, we wouldn't, it might have been more difficult for us to solve that case. The camera was the basis and the reason why we were able to, for our police department to really, the investigators to do their job and solve that. So it's been very helpful in many cases, but on a large scale, we have cameras on many of the challenge areas in our city.
And I would also add, the mayor is right on that. I would also add that we upgraded to a digital format, replacing much of the older cameras that we had. So digital certainly helped us with regard to finances.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else on business equipment? Okay, let's move on to the.
Sorry, I do.
I'm just going to start asking. Does Councilmember Lupien have a question right off in the start? Go ahead,
Hey man, I'm new. I'm learning.
You're new. You're new. You get a pass this year. Next year I'll be harder. Go ahead, Councilmember Lupien.
I noticed a lot of it is for replacement of office equipment, office furnishings, and I wondered if is there like a standard formula that's used to determine how much money will be needed per year.
What section? Can you tell me what page you're on and section you're on?
So for B1, a lot of this is routine replacement of office furnishings. So I was just wondering if there's like some standard formula that's used to determine, what needs to be replaced and when.
That's in the libraries, and so and I'll turn it over to Patty. But as you know, our libraries are often utilized by the public. You have to make sure that the tables that people are using is secure and safe. The chairs and all of that are up to par for people to be sitting in. They get a lot of wear and tear. So Patty can talk a little bit more about, but it's mostly for the use of the public at our public libraries.
The mayor said that very well. Our libraries see over 1 million visits every year, spread out among 12 different locations, and there's a lot of furniture there, and we do need to keep it up for public safety reasons and for public health reasons. We do have to make sure that our upholstered furniture is free of bed bugs and other unhealthy insects and so on. We need to make sure that the tables are secure, and it ranges into computer furniture as well. Some computer equipment is included in there as well.
Okay, and I would I guess it's not just for libraries; it's also environmental services. But sounds like it might be around the same answer.
Yeah, there's no specific formula that we use. We make allocations based on, really on the need. And this year, again, aside from the library piece, the office furnishings was not a priority.
Okay.
I was going to say we was going to use it to replace our card catalog system.
Okay.
Oh, you're so cute, Norm.
he didn't know Battleship, and he's asking about card catalogs. I don't know. I don't know.
I see a pattern.
That's right.
I also
Anything
have
else on business equipment?
one more.
Okay, last one. Councilman Lupien.
For future technology initiatives and planning, it talks about IT's roadmap. Being a former techie, I'm interested in seeing that roadmap if that's able to be provided.
Absolutely. I can get that to you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you. Last section, N1, non-public safety fleet, motor equipment. Any questions? Any questions?
Hi.
Okay, Councilmember Lupien.
I just have the same question, and maybe I'll rephrase it for this one about the electric vehicles. If there's just kind of like a breakdown on what kind of vehicles we're planning on buying, that would be great.
We'll make sure we get that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's my last one.
Okay, any other questions?
Well,
I just,
I think, okay, we'll definitely get that to you because I'm looking in 2021 and most of the sections we're not doing any replacement of vehicles, but we'll in DES operations and in DES water, but we can make sure that we get you the equipment, and that's mostly heavy equipment. So we'll make sure we get you that list.
Malik, I have one
Thank you.
just general question.
yes, council member, go ahead.
Again, I understand all the hard work that's gone into trying to see what we can do with the resources we've anticipated coming in, but do we have, I guess, additional list of cuts that might potentially need to be made if, for example, what we estimate for, taxes or sales revenue, even beyond what we think is going to come in, if it's worse than what we think? Is there another listing, if you will, for additional cuts that may have to happen, or how do we anticipate going through that process if necessary?
I'll start off and then I'll turn it over to the budget director. We've cut the part of the reason why when we started this off, we talked about borrowing more and take away cash capital and reserving the cash based on what we see or what we anticipate happening in the budget. So the CIP has been cut to the very bone. We've taken as much out of the CIP as we possibly can. And we know that we have to continue to actually do road repair. We have to continue to make the investments in vehicles, internals, and make the investments in, small equipment, IT. The CIP is probably set to where it's going to be. You will see in the budget that a reflection of those things that you mentioned. As you all know, we have we really fund the city three ways: through our property tax collection, through what we receive from the state of New York, and through sales tax. Two of those revenue streams have been significantly hit. The budget director is pulling his hair out. I'm surprised it's not more gray because of the fact that every day we're getting changes and he's trying to build a budget around budget estimates and revenue streams that is forever changing. Out of our property tax collection, $119.1 million, or 68% of that, we have to provide to the city school district. That's about, so the rest is what we have to provide essential services, meaning our police, our fire, our DES folks, our finance and budget, and all those other our city clerk and everyone. So I'm glad that you asked that question, Councilmember Ortiz, because by May 15th, I want you to remember this conversation because it is definitely going to be reflected in that budget, those changes that need to happen based on the projections that we see. And I'll turn it over to our budget director to add anything to that.
Thank you, Mayor. Sure. So definitely a challenging time, and the mayor's exactly right. The main revenue streams for the general fund, two of those three are potentially very stressed. So the hallmark of what we're trying to do here is build flexibility as to how we adapt to this, and you'll see more of that probably when the operating budget comes out. But for now, and that's why with the first year of the capital program, you see that cash capital number down as much as it is. Because the cash capital, is money that, really affects our next year budget. Our ability to borrow, pushes, we have to pay it back, obviously, when we borrow, but it pushes some more costs out for a longer term. We derive the benefits over time so we can pay for it over time. And so that's really helping us with our flexibility because, we're a municipality that allocates a lot of cash capital. It actually puts us in a good spot, because we've got the ability to make those reductions, next year from what we were planning on, as well as to, rethink the existing cash capital that we have to be able to accomplish some of those programs, for instance, like that you see zeroed out next year. So, so that's, part of the flexibility that we're trying to build here. And with these revenue streams that, are potentially not coming to fruition, we've already taken some steps in the current year, like locking down discretionary spending, right, in anticipation of this. And we're looking at some other options as well. So, so there more to come with the operating budget that'll be proposed on the 15th. But those are, the steps we're taking right now.
Thank you.
Councilmember
any other-
Evans?
Yeah.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes, yes, Madam President.
Mayor, I just want to go back to what you said about the CIP being set. And how do we balance off if the situation got much worse? I mean, it's pretty bad, but if it got much worse, how would we balance off, for example, cash for chairs in the library against another snowplow run? I mean, those kinds of cash capital things against operating issues. How does that get balanced?
So I think that as the budget director indicated, we have done a lot of things in this budget year to lock down a lot of those, to anticipate what's yet to come. And so when I say that the CIP is set as we see it now, as we see it today, based on everything that we know, we have a CIP that's at the bare minimum, knowing what we know today. If something was to change in the next month or so, we would of course come back to council and change it. One of the things about the borrowing more is that we can anticipate, or we're asking council to allow us to expand our debt limit, because we can forecast. We don't have to borrow that money if we don't have to. And that will stop us from having to make that payment. So everything is, of course, changing on a daily basis. But what we anticipate happening is that the CIP has gone through many iterations, just like we came back to all of our departments, including the city council's office, to say this. We see this coming down the pike. We originally gave you this blah. Now we need you to cut by this, right? So we anticipate those things happening, and we are accepting a lot of those additional cuts in the operating budget to be able to be flexible when it comes down to still making the capital investments that we need. If we're going to open up the libraries, making sure that they are properly, the chairs in the library are in a condition where people can sit on them. We deal with the public on a daily basis, and as the library director said, the issue becomes, if they don't necessarily need to replace that chair, they won't replace that chair, but we have to have the dollars there and available just in case they do, because if somebody falls, then the liability is on us to now pay for that lawsuit. So we want to make sure that we are not putting the public at risk by deferring certain maintenance that we definitely need to do.
That was not meant as any diminution of the importance of library chairs, but rather an exercise in expressing how the decisions are made as we balance out these very difficult choices.
Public safety will be first.
Thank you.
Maintaining public safety will be first.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the mayor and her team. I mean, I think that people will be reading about this in the history books. I mean, for municipalities and think about it, Rochester, we're in the middle of a budget year, getting ready to end a budget year come June 30th, and we're starting a budget year July 1st. And for the mayor and her team to have to put together a CIP in the middle of a pandemic, and then not knowing what the aftermath of a pandemic is going to be is admirable, hard work. I'm surprised they all don't have bags under their eyes, and they all haven't pulled their hair out yet, because this is, I've been in government, around government, in government a long time. I'm sure probably all of you that have been around a long time, I've never seen anything like this. And for you all to be able to still smile and adjust to what it is that you have to do with not knowing what's coming and what's next, is admirable. And I think that it gives me confidence that that we'll get through this because of the way that you've been doing it so far. And I hope that we can continue to keep smiling even in these troubling weeks that we have ahead. So I appreciate the work on the CIP and all the work that you're doing in this current budget year, and not to mention what you're doing for the coming budget year in uncertain times. I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans, and I definitely will say you're welcome, but we don't do it by ourselves. I definitely want to give the 3,000 employees of the city of Rochester the kudos, because we didn't go through this by ourselves, and in council for being able to, recognize the challenges we're in, to adjust on the fly. We didn't get here because we wanted to be here, but it was all of us really working together to make it happen. But we, the leadership team is great, and they're all experts at what they're doing. And I'm just thankful to have them, the deputy mayor and everybody, the budget director, finance director, all of them working on this together. But I can tell you that our employees have really stepped up to the plate, have worked overtime. I can tell, in NBD, Gary and his team, getting those loans out the door for those businesses, working with our community partners to make sure that the CDBG and the ESG dollars were in the hop with stuff. Danielle and their team. So, handing out food and continuing to work hard. So I definitely want to recognize all of the people that work for us, that are doing a yeoman's job of adjusting and changing when new regulations come down. Even the city clerk's office and the law department, having to now do online marriage licenses,
Right,
and
right.
in the drop of a hat, just to be able to have an IT department that says, okay, have a clerk's department, law department says, all right, well, we're just going to get it done. And that's literally what we're doing right now. It's about getting it done so that our residents don't suffer from, the pandemic. They're already suffering enough.
No, thank you. Thank you.
I thank
wanna,
you all, and thank you, Councilmember Evans, for a very efficient CIP review. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I try. I want to see you guys in person. I mean, and Vice President Lightfoot, you see this hair, man. My hair hasn't been this long since I've been like 10 years old. So
Looks like you got a haircut, though. Did the Vice President get a haircut?
You looking pretty good, man.
Well, he's a barber, so he can
Right.
cut his own hair. I
I
think
know it, but he's
I
not
think
supposed to
Councilmember
do.
Payo got a haircut, or he might have cut his own hair too. He's he's nicely lined up. It
Yeah.
looks
I had
good.
no hair. I got one haircut, and somebody made me feel bad. One of my barber friends. So I ain't cutting it no more until we go back.
Everybody can
Let
get a
it
haircut.
grow out, Will. Let it grow out. That's the new style, man.
That's right.
Thank you, my brother.
The deputy mayor could use some help.
Soon everybody be rocking afros.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you all, and if there's nothing else to come before Finance Committee, we are adjourned, and we will reconvene next week for Finance Committee next Thursday. So
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
thank you, everybody.
Everybody stay safe.
You too. Take care, everyone.